Hello again. So, real quick, the video that's going to go over how David Saintsing lied to me through his teeth on the day he was firing me by the dumpsters next to the barn. Before I go in real quick to the store and get something. One of the reasons David gave me for why he was firing me was he said he needed someone who could do the full job. Because up to that point, I'd gone out on some rides, guided some rides, but alongside Jorge, I hadn't taken any out on my own. I didn't feel comfortable doing it. And, but I was on top of my barn duties, my barn game, and Jeremy Edwards, the manager of the barn before he left, said, your barn skills are good, solid, your riding skills, but promised to train me when he got back. So, here's the thing. And he said, so, Valenti could do the full job. Valenti being Jorge's nephew, who was a legal immigrant, as far as I could tell, a legal immigrant. He didn't speak a word of English. Not a word. We'll get into that in a moment. Here's the thing with that. And David's such a coward that, like, while he was talking to me, he had to put his shades down. The sun was not in his eyes because I was clocking as he was putting his shades down, like, the sun's not in your eyes. The sun is behind me, but off to the right here. And it's not quite sundown. Literally, we stopped about an hour before sundown. Like, it's not in your eyes. The shades going down was like a protection barrier between he and I, because I was drilling him for answers. I insisted I deserved explanations for why I was being fired. And he's a lying little weasel. And he, I think, started to realize, like, oh, she's not going to be very easy for me to just give some bullshit explanation to and tell her to piss off, you know? Cowards wear shades when they're having just uncomfortable conversations. And real big cowards go out of the way to put their shades down when the sun is not in their eyes, when they're having a confrontational conversation that they don't want to have. They have to be accountable for themselves. That's David Saintsing of Thomasville, North Carolina. So the reason why that doesn't make any sense, he needs someone who could do the full job. First of all, because Jeremy Edwards told me and said he had the backing of David on this. That I was doing a great job and they wanted me to stay. And I didn't have to worry about taking any rides out. In fact, Jeremy had this conversation with me on November 26th. I have it in my phone still. He and I having that conversation together. I took screenshots of, like, here's Jeremy Edwards' phone call on this day at this time. I remember I was in the barn office when he called me. And Jorge had just gone out on a ride. And I was thinking to myself if I even wanted to answer it, because my cat had just died. And I was already starting to feel like things were being weird, really weird around there. Jeremy, absolutely tried his damnedest to convince me, like, we want you to stay. David's behind me on this. And I suspect David was listening in on that phone call. It was like a 3-way phone call. Because David actually said something during that conversation that we had by the dumpsters. He's like, and I heard you and you're saying something like this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I didn't say that to you. I said that to Jeremy during our last conversation. He was like, oh yeah. And then I realized, like, oh, you're listening on that conversation. It was a 3-way conversation that I wasn't made privy to. Huh. When I was being led to believe that I was only speaking to Jeremy, I'm pretty sure David was listening on that conversation too. Mr. Control Freak. Anyway, the reason why it doesn't make any sense, I can dismantle David's statement and reasoning with common sense right here, right now, is because if it were true, he needed to, they were low on resources for the ranch. And he could only afford to keep on employees who could do the full job. Well, then why the fuck didn't you fire Quinn's ass a long time ago, you lying piece of shit, David? Quinn being the 16-year-old boy who comes into the barn and helps muck the stalls and, like, fill up the water troughs after school. I do his job and then some. I have to get on his ass to do his own job, to do his job. You know how many times I've walked in, like, I've told him, like, you need to do this and this and this. And a lot of times it'd be direct orders through me from Jorge. And I'm like, I'm running back to my RV real quick. I'm going to grab my mug of tea or something. And I'll get back to the barn. And, like, the water trough will be overflowing. And he's sitting in the barn office, in the chair, on his phone, chuckling away at some random ass video because he's a teenage kid. And guess what? In the whole 3 months that I was there, I never saw Quinn on one horse. Not once. Never. He doesn't know how to, like, ride well enough to take people out on rides. He can't be a horse guide. He's still in high school. He's a teenager. For that matter, neither can Valenti, Jorge's nephew. He can't be a horse guide. You know why? Because he doesn't speak a word of English. He knows maybe 1 or 2 words of English. Literally, Jorge told me, you have to teach Valenti English. What makes you think, David, that Valenti, who looked like he had just about as much experience on a horse as I did, and doesn't speak any English, that he's more qualified to take people out on those rides on the beach than I am? What makes you think that, David? If anything goes wrong out on that beach, how's he going to instruct, even if nothing goes wrong? Like, that's more likely to lead to things going wrong. Valenti can't speak any English. How's he going to instruct people out on those rides? It was hard enough with Jorge, who could barely speak good enough English. It's hard enough for him. And with him, it was hard enough for me to understand shit he was saying out there. It was really hard. And I was used to hearing him. It was really hard for the riders who weren't used to hearing him, weren't used to, like, making out his Spanglish. A lot of times I'd have to repeat back to them things he said. How the F is Valenti going to handle those rides for those riders out on that beach when he doesn't speak any freaking English? That's putting people at risk, David. That's putting people at risk. You know why he feels comfortable doing that, people? Because every rider, before they mount onto a horse there and go out on that beach, agrees to sign waivers. They're basically signing David's responsibility for their lives and safety away. So because David won't suffer any negative consequences if anyone gets hurt or killed out there on that beach on his horses, there's no incentive for him to really keep those horses well taken care of, and that barn well taken care of, and make sure all his bases are covered in that area of his ranch. Because only people with empathy and a conscience and conscientiousness and compassion hold themselves to those boundaries. You understand? So because I have those things, I was like, I'm not comfortable taking guiding rides on my own. I don't feel like I'm a good enough rider yet, and I don't want to get someone killed if I don't have enough control over the horses and enough control over, like, my horse. How am I going to help anybody who's having a problem with their horse if I'm not quite ready with my horse? So conscientiousness, empathy, and a sense of, like, oh, people could get really hurt or die as a result of me being selfish and narcissistic and greedy. Yeah, well, if you're a narcissist, highly narcissistic, or sociopath, or a psychopath, and you're low in empathy and low in conscientiousness, and all you're thinking about is your bottom dollar and how to make more money, and being cheap, guess what? You don't have any of the empathy or conscientiousness or any of that to rein you in. You don't have any of that stopping you or motivating you to do better for, like, the horses you're responsible for. Instead, those people, the only thing that motivates them or stops them is the stick, is negative consequences. So when the riders sign those waivers, saying that it's not David's or the ranch's responsibility at all if they get hurt. You're making it so David won't suffer any negative consequences if he doesn't take care of those horses properly or upkeep that barn properly or provide proper guides for the rides who know what they're doing or at least know how to speak English so they can communicate with the riders, with you, the riders. He doesn't feel he has to do any of that because you're already signing away his responsibility. And he's a narcissist. So he's not held by his own code or standards. He doesn't have any except money. Money, money, money. And that's how that goes. David, you are an irresponsible piece of shit and you are going to get someone killed on that beach if you keep putting illegal immigrants out there guiding those rides who can barely speak any freaking English. It was acceptable because Jorge had a decent amount of experience with horses, and you could tell he was pretty good with horses. And he had a decent enough grasp on the English language. But Valenti looked like he barely had any experience with horses beyond my own, and he didn't speak a word of English. And, again, if you really needed only people who could do the full job, you wouldn't have kept Quinn on. And Quinn was literally in that barn working when I went in there to pick up my tools on the day I was fired. I shook his hand and told him good luck and all that. So I was sorry. I did my best I could and all. Oh, I wanted to say this. When I did that, Valenti was only like 2 to 3 yards away in the barn, like right there, standing, watching the whole thing. Where we keep the bales of hay. This is towards the back of the barn. Because I went back there to get my speaker, my Bluetooth speaker that I let Jorge use all the time to listen to his music. I plugged it in back there and left it back there during almost the entirety of the time I was working there. It's all shitty and dusty and gross now. So I said goodbye to Quinn, shook his hand, and said, by the way, it turns out that Jorge's the one who's been talking shit about me, complaining about me for over a month. And as I was saying that, I looked over at Valenti, because Valenti is, according to Jorge, Valenti is Jorge's nephew. I was like, it's Jorge doing it the whole time. And here's what Valenti did. He knew what I was saying. He didn't speak English, but he knew what I was saying. Like, I don't speak very good Spanish, but I could. Oh, we're gonna make I'm gonna make some videos talking about like the little conversations that Jorge would have in Spanish with like the other illegal immigrants around me in that barn. Felt like I was being put on display, and there was enough that I could make out, and also enough that's like I'm not an idiot. I can make out. I can pretty much pick up on what you're putting down to some degree. Where it's like he was making a spectacle of me in that barn. We're going to cover that in other videos. But, like, yeah, that's what Valenti did when I was saying Jorge was talking shit about me. Valenti was just like... It looked like... If for any of you have ever seen Interview with the Vampire, there's a part where, like, Louis, played by Brad Pitt, he just discovered that the little girl, Kirsten Dunst's character... She was burned up. She was locked in a chamber where the sun came out and she turned into cinders. And he just found her there and he was distraught. And he came back out of the chamber. And that, like, really mean bastard vampire, I forget his name, was standing there. And he was the one who did it, basically. And he just goes... It was like that. Oh, and Jorge did that. It reminded me of when my cat had died. And one of the first things when I was upset and I was saying to Jorge, I brought them here. I came here and I brought them here because I was looking for a safe, stable place for us. I wanted us to have a safe, stable place to settle down. I took them across the country and back. Never a problem. We camped out in deserts. We camped out in places with all kinds of coyotes and foxes. This doesn't make any sense that she's attacked by coyotes within a few yards of the back of the barn here. And that's the same look and same gesture that Jorge did at first until he realized like how seriously upset I was and like I might make a bigger deal out of it. Oh, and that I was more insightful than He wanted to give me credit for it. He did that. And I was like, you see me, Miss Cat Mom, almost I'm practically in tears over the loss of my cat. And your response is, low on empathy much? Low on compassion much? What the fuck did you do to my cat, Jorge, you piece of shit? Yeah, so anyway, David Saintsing lied straight to my face when he was firing me. Straight to my face, and I just diffused that with a little bit of common sense. Because he didn't fire Quinn. And he was only paying me a few dollars more than Quinn. Quinn, per his father's own word, to me, Rennie, told me, Quinn's making $9 an hour. I was started off making $12 an hour. Plus, I got my RV lot included in my pay. Yeah, well, at the time, this was, when I had this conversation with Rennie, Quinn's dad, at the time, this was just before Laura Halley, the manager who brought me in, was fired. And Rennie was complaining about how the other workers, we get our lots for free, included in our pay. And it's not fair that Quinn is a worker in the barn for the ranch, and he doesn't get that as part of his pay. He only gets $9 an hour. And they said, like, it's at the very least, you should get like a discount. We should get a discounted lot because Quinn's parents live there. They pay the rent for their lot, and Quinn works in the barn after hours, after school, and on weekends. And I was like, I agree. That doesn't seem fair. You're right. You guys should at least get like a discounted lot. And actually, and I've got the email to prove this, I believe. Maybe the text, at least something. I contacted Elaine after the big firing of Laura Halley. I was way more in contact with the owner, David Saintsing. I've never really had any contact with Jeff that I can recall. But I was in a lot more contact with David Saintsing and with Elaine Crowell, their HR manager. And at one point, I contacted Elaine because it just occurred to me, like, I should make sure. It was just after they hired her, or fired Laura Halley. And we were told, like, Elaine was like, if you have any questions, issues, whatever, you can contact me, blah, blah, blah. She said that sort of blanket statement to people. And I made sure I went out of my way to contact Elaine and say, listen, this has been an issue. It has been brought up to me. I've heard some people chatting about it. It's not sitting well with some people. It's not really fair. Quinn works for you guys, and he doesn't get quite the same pay that we do. I mean, he shouldn't get, he's a teenager, he's a kid. He gets $9 an hour. That's decent, but he should at least get a discount. His parents should get a discount on their lot. And I went into, like, how, Rennie helps out around here. He doesn't have to, but, like, your guests and stuff, he helps them fix up their rigs and stuff. I'd say at least that's earned them a discount on their lot. I stuck up for Quinn and Rennie and his family. Like, you guys, like, I went out of my way to do so. Like, I just think you guys should, since you're renegotiating stuff and restructuring stuff, like, I think it would be fair if you guys at least gave Quinn and his family a discount on the lot, along with his pay, since that's what you give all the other employees. Or you give us, like, the lot for free, and then we get a meager hourly wage. But, like, I was all right with $12 an hour as long as I got a free lot. So so yeah, Quinn, so I don't know what became of that, if they ever did get their free lot or at least a discount on their lot, but Quinn was getting paid only a few dollars less than I was. $3 less. I was started off at $12. I think maybe it was bumped up to $13, so $3 to $4 less. And I'm pretty sure at least a discounted lot. Sorry, I got like a low battery message. So he's getting just about the same pay I was. And he certainly couldn't do the full job, you lying piece of shit. Why don't you try another excuse, David? That money really does not buy intelligence, does it? Or empathy. You are a fucking fool, David. I mean, I guess it's a good thing you have money, because that's about all you must have. The pieces of paper in a bank. not integrity, not intelligence, not empathy, not conscientiousness, no bravery to be had, because you had to use your sunglasses to protect you from the scary conversation you were having with the girl who had a mind of her own. You are a pathetic little worm. Prove me wrong, though. Go ahead. Compensate me what you owe me for my wasted time, for my cat that didn't have to die. You lured me down under false pretenses with the promise of a long-term job, and there was no intention of really giving me a long-term job. You wanted me there to fill like roughly a 3-month gap. My cat's dead because of it. I could have gone to other work camping jobs. I had other opportunities. But I'm sure he won't take any responsibility for anything. I'm sure he'll find some philosophical bullshit reason why nothing's his fault. That's how they work, the narcissists. Nothing's their fault. It's like, seriously, it's a sickness. It's like, seriously, it's as if they will dissipate. I've dealt with enough of them. It is as if they behave, seriously. It's like pulling teeth trying to get them to admit any wrongdoing or any fault, and much less to get them to sincerely apologize for it and compensate for it. Good luck. Because they just have a story spun in their minds about how they're superheroes and they don't do anything wrong. And if you even begin to question it, they shut you off. They just, in one ear, out the other. They've developed some magical ability to shut you down and stop listening to you when they even sense you're about to criticize them on anything. How pathetic. I went to art school. We had whole classes on being criticized. It's called critique, because artists get critiqued all the time. So it taught us how to accept constructive criticism and how to give it. So I know how to be critiqued and criticized, told I'm wrong. And I know how to learn from that. Not David, apparently. Let's see if we can make David learn something. I'm going to get PETA involved in all that. Let's see if we can all together make David St. Sing learn a thing or two.